TV.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
It's kind of a Shabbat, isn't it? Huh?
Back-to-back Shabbat.
Back-to-back Shabbats. Back up to Shabbat. Back into Shabbat. Wherever you turn, it's Shabbat right now. But it's a good thing to be with you guys here this evening to celebrate Shavuot. We've been counting the Omer for 7 weeks now. We've arrived at Shavuot. For the sake of those who are listening by tape or by IsraelNet, we just got through reading the book of Ruth, the entire book of Ruth. And I'd like to do this in 2 parts, because as I was studying, I really saw 2 things. I began studying the barley. That's how I approached it. And as I studied the barley in Scripture, I could see 2 definite themes emerging. One is that barley is, the poor man's bread, so it represents work. That was pretty clear. The second part of it I didn't expect to find, but I found it anyway. And the second part of it has to do with war. The barley bread represents battle, fighting, war, going to war for the covenant. So for the first part tonight, I've titled it Working for Shavuot. And then tomorrow morning we will finish up, and that will be called Fighting for Sukkot. Because we are going to have to both work for our festivals, and we're going to have to fight for them if we want them back. Because trust me, we don't have them. We're going to have to work for our Sabbaths. Have any of you ever observed a Sabbath in Israel? You don't know what Sabbath is like. To join in with an entire nation of the same mind, of the same spirit. So eager for that sundown on Friday evening and the total peace that reigns until sundown on Saturday evening. We're swimming uphill right now. We're like the salmon that Brianna read about. We are definitely swimming upstream in our culture, in our nation, to try to be observant of the covenant, of the festivals, of the Sabbaths. But one day we will join with all Israel. And it will be much easier for us to keep that covenant. But that's what the barley illustrates to us at Shavuot. It illustrates commitment to the covenant, to the Torah covenant. So whenever we think of barley, and that's why I put the barley down there on the step, we should call to mind not just the barley harvest, but we should automatically think Shavuot. When we hear the word barley, that should be our word association is Shavuot. Because that was when we were betrothed. Remember that covenant was with those standing there and those who were not there. But yet we were there, weren't we? We were there. We were present. And so annually we commemorate, just like you celebrate your wedding anniversary, right? Or you're in big trouble. You don't forget your wedding anniversary. You just don't even bother going home, right? Or you better have a big armful of roses and candy, or a date set at a nice restaurant, something. You must commemorate your anniversary. It was a special occasion. Well, we commemorate our betrothal, our marriage, to our Heavenly Father, to our Heavenly Husband, to our Heavenly Kinsman Redeemer. We commemorate that every year. We have a wedding anniversary, and it's called Shavuot. And we had better remember that anniversary. That marriage, remember, without going through the whole story again, it was marked by some specific things. They were asked to wash themselves, wash their clothes. And it said, sanctify yourselves, set yourselves apart. Don't have marital relations for 3 days. Set yourselves apart during that time to prepare yourself for this marriage. And then on that day, the mountain, that experience was marked not only by that washing and that sanctification, but all of a sudden here's fire on the mountain. There's the blowing of that heavenly shofar. There's Israel's willingness to obey. They said, we will do and we will hear. And then 3 times they say, all that Adonai has spoken, we will do. And at that time, they received kind of a figurative ring around their finger. And that is called what? The wedding band. And what is the sign? Shabbat. He said, this is your sign. This is how I will know that you are betrothed to me. The same way, if you ever see a man go into a bar and slip off his wedding band, what is about to happen? Something bad is about to happen. He's about to violate his covenant, or that is his intention. If you take that wedding band off, you don't want people to know that you are married. You are trying to conceal the fact that you are married because you're in the mischief. And that's putting it nicely. But he says, I don't want you to take your ring off. He said, I want you to remember that you are eternally betrothed. You are married to me. And the way that people will know that you were married is that you're going to observe the Shabbat. Not just the weekly Shabbat. He said, my Sabbaths, plural. In Exodus 31, 13 through 18. And I took some of it out. If you want to read the whole thing, you can. But I'm just going to read the pertinent parts. It says, but as for you, speak to the sons of Israel, saying, you shall surely observe my Sabbaths, plural. For this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. Therefore you are to observe the Sabbath, for it is holy to you. For 6 days work may be done, but on the 7th day there is a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to the Lord. So the sons of Israel shall observe the Sabbath to celebrate the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the sons of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, but on the 7th day he ceased from labor and was refreshed. And when he had finished speaking with him upon Mount Sinai, he gave Moshe the 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone written by the finger of God. So he gives us the sign, which are his Sabbaths, that you shall keep and pass on to your children. And then he gives us that written ketubah. He gives us the agreement in writing, written with his own finger. Now, there's a couple of words in there that I would just love to delve into, and one is the sign. It's ot in Hebrew. Aleph, Vav, Tav. That's got some wonderful, in-depth, mystical meanings to it. We won't go into it tonight. Let's look at another word that really stood out to me because it was translated as celebrate in English. It says, you will celebrate the Sabbath throughout their generations. Well, I looked it up in Hebrew, and they're using la'asot, to celebrate. La'asot means to do, to make. So what he's saying is, we are going to make the Sabbath. We are going to do the Sabbath. We are going to make the Sabbath. It implies that we have some sort of contribution in doing it. It's not just, oh, gee whiz, great to be here. It's Sabbath. I'm celebrating. I'm dancing and singing and clapping. It's more than that. He says you're making it. You're making it throughout your generations. So it's not that everything in the world stops on Sabbath for a covenant keeper. There is yet something to be done and to be made on these Sabbaths. There is a type of work, a type of doing, not just on the weekly Sabbaths, but at our festival Sabbaths. This is a Sabbath, a high Sabbath. We have Sabbaths at Pesach. We have a Sabbath at Shavuot. We have high Sabbaths at Sukkot. There is more than the weekly Sabbath. And these are different from secular work. He calls it your work. But on His Sabbaths, we are supposed to do His work. So it's not a complete rest except for our own work. For His, there's still a making and doing. There has to be a diligence on our part. And it is this devotion, it is our measure of our devotion to His Sabbaths that is the sign of the Torah covenant between us. That covenant given at Sinai on Shavuot. So the barley harvest is going to connect for us Pesach to Shavuot. Remember when Jimmy taught, he said that Pesach does not end. It continues in the counting of the Omer. It continues forward to Shavuot. We're technically still celebrating Pesach as we count forward to Shavuot. It's connected. It's not disconnected. We have a specific connection there. At Pesach, we offer the first fruits of the barley harvest. And then you don't stop with the first fruits. If you go out to harvest something, let's say you put in corn this year. Let's say you went out and you harvested 1 row. Are you done? That corn will continue to ripen. And you will continue to harvest throughout the season. Remember, it says 7 sevens. You will continue counting. You will continue that barley harvest through the counting of the Omer. And that will bring you forward to Shavuot. And that says that's what Ruth did. She just kept working and working and working from the first fruits of the barley harvest all the way through to Shavuot until its completion. And then at that completion, we thank Adonai for all the blessing. And you might say, well, why do we have to thank Him? We did all the work. That's the wrong attitude. Because we could have been in a famine, the same type of famine that drove Naomi and her family out of the house of bread, which was a wrong choice, by the way. You have to deal with the reason for the famine. You don't run away from the consequences of your behavior. If there's famine, there was a disobedience. And then we get the consequence of that disobedience and we say, well, I don't want the consequences, I'm going to run away. I'm going to go where I can get bread. And what they did is they camped out over here. It brought forth death because they were living outside of the covenant when they knew better. And then this over here is rectified and they said, well, we'll trot back over here. And just, don't call me pleasant, call me bitter. Well, why was she bitter? Why was she blaming God? She should have stayed there. She and her husband should have stayed there and dealt with what the Lord was trying to do in their lives. What He was trying to do in the lives of those people in that community instead of running away. But a lot of us do that, don't we? We run away from the consequences of our behavior. And then we finally realize that you can't run far enough away from the consequences of your behavior. You can't run away from God. You are who you are. You might as well come back. But instead of coming back with the right attitude, oh, God just hates me. Just call me bitter. I deserved it. I earned it. That's not the right attitude. But that's what Naomi had. That's how she came back. And as we come to Shavuot, we want to arrive with the right attitude. Definitely. And at Shavuot, that's when we say, all that Adonai has spoken, we will do. This is our anniversary. We are renewing our commitment. We are renewing our marriage vows. All that He has spoken, we will do. This is a festival of devotion to the covenant. And the barley is that symbol of devotion, commitment, diligence, hard work. It's not the same as Sukkot. It's a totally different atmosphere. It's an atmosphere of work, sweat, tears, investing yourself. There's other examples in Scripture, and I'm not going to list all of them, that barley is a symbol of commitment and devotion and dedication. Do you remember the offering that the jealous husband was to bring if he suspected his wife of adultery? It was barley. You bring the barley offering if you suspect that she has violated your covenant with her. When that devotion is called into question, the barley will come up in some form. Also in Leviticus 27:16, it says, if a man dedicates to the Lord part of his family land, its value is to be set according to the amount of seed required for it, 50 shekels of silver to a homer of barley seed. So if you in that time and that place wanted to dedicate a portion of your income to the work of the Lord, to the temple or whatever, he says the way that you're going to value that land is you're going to reckon it according to what it would cost to seed it with barley. That is the measure of your devotion. It's measured in barley seed. How dedicated you are. So what is devotion? What's diligence? What's commitment? I think it's just following through, isn't it? Just hanging in there. In sickness and in health, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, till death do us part. That's what devotion is. It's our conduct, it's our behavior that builds our spouse's trust in us, that builds their faith in us. You know, have you ever been around someone, did you work with someone that really didn't trust their spouse? And they're on the phone, they're calling them 50 times a day. You know, they're driving around where the person said they would be, making sure that that's where the car is. They're checking the phone bills to see who they'd called. That's not trust. That's not faith. But over the years, our conduct should build our spouse's faith in us. It's the same way that, you know, if you walk with Yeshua, you will gain trust in Him. But how much trust can we say that He's gained in us over the years? Has our conduct improved His confidence and His faith in us? I think it applies whether we're talking about an earthly marriage or a heavenly marriage. It's the things that we do that build trust. So how many of us are married in an earthly sense? Okay, most of us. Now, raise your hand if your marriage is always convenient for you. Oh, it's always convenient for you. Okay? Now, if sometimes you do things you really don't want to do, if sometimes you go out of your way, sometimes you just bite your tongue when you really want to say something, if you've ever inconvenienced yourself for the sake of peace in the relationship, raise your hand. Okay. Marriage is not always convenient. It doesn't always fit just with what we want to do at the time. But we do things that are inconvenient, that we don't want to do, because we are dedicated to that covenant, because we've got the ring. And we think that it actually means something. It's not just a piece of jewelry. It's a commitment. It's much bigger than just a ring on the finger. It's your love, it's your commitment that motivates you to put up with a little discomfort from time to time. Or maybe a little often, more often than that, I don't know. But of all the things we can say about the Torah covenant, we cannot say it's convenient. We can say a lot of things, but it is not convenient. It's a marriage that sometimes requires us to be inconvenienced, to do things that we don't want to do. And I think if we break down a few of the things that Ruth and Naomi and Boaz did in this book, we can see an excellent example of what it means to be devoted to the covenant, regardless of the inconvenience. Here's some things that a Torah covenant might require us to do that we can pull out of Ruth's story. Number one, this covenant might ask us to prioritize our loyalties. We don't like to do that. But if you look at Ruth, she left her own people. She left her own family. She left old gods, old ways of worship, old ways of believing and thinking and doing, to follow her mother-in-law. Let's just call her mother in Torah. Okay? What if you had to call your mother-in-law your mother in Torah? Put a whole new light on things, wouldn't it? Now think of Naomi's state of mind when Ruth decides to follow her mother in Torah. She is behaving anything but a mother in Torah. She's gripey. She's complaining. She's in a pity party. Oh, pitiful me. But somehow Ruth saw in this mother in Torah, even though she was a grumpy bellyacre, there was something about her that was worth clinging to, that was even better than her natural family. How she arrived at that conclusion, we'll never know, because she did it in spite of Naomi. But she had heard some things, maybe from her dead husband, maybe from Elimelech. Maybe in better days Naomi hadn't been such a complainer, but she had heard a Torah. She had heard a word of Torah and latched onto it and said, I don't care how big a complainer is, she's got something I need. And I will follow her at all costs, even if it means leaving my natural family behind me. Prioritize. What's really important? Number two, sometimes this Torah covenant might ask us to love people who seem a little strange to us. You see, Ruth loved her mother in Torah, even though those ways must have seemed very strange to a Moabite, because their worship system was completely different. They had many gods. They had different ways of worship. They did not consider what we consider immorality. They did not consider immoral at all. Totally different belief system. But they loved one another in spite of the strangeness of custom. And if you look at Ruth, he's constantly warning the young men in the fields, don't scold her, don't insult her, don't embarrass her, don't molest her just because she doesn't know the procedures. She doesn't know our customs. She doesn't know all of the Torah. She knows enough of it to know that she's entitled to come glean out of this field, but she doesn't know our local customs, so leave her alone. Yes, she's a little strange, but be kind to her. She was unlearned. But isn't this the whole message of the Torah, to be kind to the stranger and to the alien? Boaz got it. We've got to get that. Sometimes we're going to have to love people that are just a tad strange and they don't know our customs. And we are a tad strange to them too. Number three, sometimes we need to choose something that's less attractive, and we don't want to hear this, because it's the sensible thing to do. We don't like to choose the sensible thing, do we? But did you hear how Boaz praised Ruth for not chasing the younger, more attractive men? Now, I don't know how old he was. I don't know how ugly he was. I don't know how anything he was. But I know that he didn't feel like he could measure up physically to some of the other young men she could have chased after, to fulfill her needs, to meet her needs. So what's the message there? What can we learn from that? Look for the old men. Now, do I mean literally old men? Not exactly. In Scripture, sometimes young men refers to those who are still lacking some wisdom of experience in the Word. They are still subject to a lot of passion. When they get into arguing about the Scriptures and so forth, it can just, come to blows. Old men in Scripture are called elders, and it has to do with their beards. That's what it actually physically refers to as their beards. But what distinguishes an elder, an older man, from a young man is not so much the passion for the Torah, but the fact that an older, more experienced person in the Torah will exercise kindness in how they live out those commandments. See, the young men he knew were prone to snap at her because she wouldn't do things right. But Boaz was nothing but kind. Pull out a few extras from the sheaves. Make sure you put it where she can get it. If she goes here or there somewhere she shouldn't, don't worry about it. Leave her alone. Be kind to her. Because they could have fulfilled the letter of the Torah by letting her go behind the reapers and glean, but they could have made her miserable in the process. Boaz made sure that she kept her dignity, even in her ignorance. So that's what I mean by look for the old men. Look for people who not only know the Torah, but they know how to be kind about teaching you and schooling you in those commandments. That they won't bite your head off the first time you make a mistake or wander off in the wrong part of the field. You can kind of locate a youngster in the covenant, not by their age, but how much judging they do of unlearned people. Number 4, what else can we learn from Ruth? Conform to someone else's time and work schedule. Ruth worked, it said, from morning until evening, and she hardly even took a break in the shelter, it said. Just probably what she had to do to keep going. She took a short rest, and she ate lunch by invitation. But other than that, she didn't demand that the harvesters work around her schedule, her favorite work days, her favorite work hours. Well, I'm an afternoon person, so let's not get this thing rolling, till around noon. I'm not a morning person, so I would prefer that nothing get rolling before 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay? She didn't do that. She was there when the work started, and she stopped when the work stopped. She was on someone else's time schedule because that's what was necessary at that time. That is a work attitude. That's a laborer. That's a servant. She didn't demand a smoke break every 2 hours. She didn't want to sign up to be in the union. She had a servant's heart. She had a humble heart. She worked modestly with the young women. She didn't go chasing after those, young studs working in the reaper part, cruising for a husband. That's not what she did. She very modestly, she took Boaz's advice. She worked with the young women for safety, for modesty. She worked hard, and she worked smart. She used her head. She followed the plan of someone who knew more and better than she did. The right people will notice when we work hard, we work smart, and we take the boss's advice. The right people will eventually notice. And you know what? When we work hard for Adonai, when we work smart for Adonai, and we take his advice, he notices. He will meet us in that field, and he will bless us in ways that we don't even know. Ruth didn't even know what Boaz was doing for her. And we'll think we're doing all this work, and we're not. He's laying it out there for us to reap. These qualities, when we work hard, we don't complain, we're on their time schedule instead of ours, that can lead to an invitation to eat lunch with the Lord of the estate, to dip in his dish with him, and to earn an abundance that we can take back and share with our families. Number 5, we can overlook blunders of ignorance. It goes back to looking for the older men. Boaz warned his reapers not to insult or embarrass Ruth because of her low position as a stranger to the covenant. Sometimes people come into our lives and they're just not on our level, or we don't think they are, because they don't know much. They're different. They act differently. But it's very important, especially to new people that might come into this congregation who don't know anything. Maybe they came out of a church. They don't know what we're doing. They don't know why we're doing it. They just know that there's some sort of attraction. They feel that maybe there's some sort of safety in here. Somebody knows something in here that they need. They're like Ruth. They don't really know why they're following. They're just following because there's a spirit in them that's pulling them here. The last thing we should do is embarrass them for blunders of ignorance. That's important. And along with that, we should protect the vulnerable. People who don't know as much, who aren't as emotionally or mentally strong. Our children. If we know our children are in danger, if we know that there are fields they should not be in, we should put a hedge of protection about them. We should always protect the vulnerable. And Boaz even warned Ruth not to go in other fields, even though they were Israelites and shouldn't have been molesting her. He knew that there was danger even in another covenant field. But he said, in my field you will be protected. So we have to beware of even unscrupulous Israelites who might not treat people so well. And also notice that he protected her reputation on the threshing floor. You know, he didn't get cold feet even though she uncovered them. Not really sure what was going on there. But because he knew she was a virtuous woman. She wasn't a floozy. He knew she had a good reason for being there. She said the right thing, and he's thinking, yeah, that sounds probably like Naomi. When she spoke those words explaining why she was there, he's like, okay, this girl's connecting with the covenant. But he protected her reputation. He said, okay, go back to sleep, but before the sun comes up, so that no one will see you here and say, oh, well, you know, she went up and slept with the men on the threshing floor all night. In order to protect your reputation, I'm going to send you away from here before the sun comes up. So we should always be careful to protect one another's reputation. If we see someone in a compromising position, don't assume the worst. Assume the best and protect their reputation. Protect their modesty. Husbands, protect your wives. Don't tell people more than they need to know about your wife in a personal sense. Protect her modesty. Protect her in the darkness. Don't make known in the daylight the things that are done in darkness. Another lesson we can learn is to exercise patience and follow the rules. How do we do that? Especially if it means we might miss an opportunity. You realize what it took for Boaz to do it the right way? He obviously cares for this young woman. Look, he went way out of his way to make sure she was cared for in the field. And then she meets her on the threshing floor. And don't you know, at that point, his heart desired her above all things? And even Naomi said, this man's not going to rest till he takes care of it today. But he still followed the rules. What if he had said, oh, this is the Lord's will, let's just skip right over, even though legally there's another man that should take her to be his wife and to acquire that property that belonged to her dead husband? I'm going to go ahead and marry her and we'll figure out the details later. Let's just be passionate and it's love, and who can stop love? That's not what he did. He said, let's do this the right way. Let me go find the elders of the city. Let me go find that nearer kinsman redeemer and give him the opportunity, because you know what? If this is God, he's going to refuse. And we'll have done things the right way. We'll have done them decently and in order. And it's still within the protection of God. So he exercised that patience, and it was done correctly. The next lesson we can learn is that we probably need to redefine who the family is. Boaz, once he recognizes that Ruth is virtuous and she's interested and behaving in a covenant way, he calls her daughter. Naomi calls Ruth her daughter. Ruth calls Naomi her mother. And then when Ruth has a child, she gives it to Naomi and says, this is your son. It's a whole new family relationship. And it's based on a relationship to the covenant, not necessarily to the natural family line. And it says that Ruth was better to Naomi than 7 sons. There are times when people in your covenant family will be better to you than 7 mothers and fathers, 7 brothers and sisters, 7 daughters and sons, because they're a family of faith. The next lesson is to work. We can't get around that if we read Ruth. And if we really read, we see that she worked at a job that others might have considered demeaning. That's the lowest person on the totem pole that runs behind and tries to pick up the droppings from the harvest. It could have been considered demeaning. But you know, no matter how demeaning we might think our job is, how low on the totem pole we think we might have sunk, it's still healthier to do that job than to sit idle. It's more damaging to your body, to your soul, and your spirit to do nothing than to do a lowly job. Look at the difference between Naomi and Ruth. Ruth's out there working. Don't care what the job is, just let me work. And even is grateful when he is kind to her. She says, I'm a foreigner, I don't deserve it. You know, in our day and age, I can't imagine anybody going up to their boss. Let's say you're working minimum wage down at Wendy's, and you walk up to your boss at the end of the first week and say, thank you for giving me this job. I really needed it. Do you know of anybody that would do that? No, because they think they're working the bottom of the barrel. Nobody respects me. How can anybody that works at a fast food joint be respected? But you can be respected, no matter what your job is. Adonai, if we are faithful, he can promote us from the dungeon of Egypt to the second in the land. If we are faithful in that dungeon, we can go behind the reapers and pick up the leftovers and be grateful for the leftovers. And as long as we are diligent, it may be that we end up marrying the Lord of that estate and being his co-heir and producing a son who becomes the ancestor of the Messiah himself. That's not the bottom of the barrel. That's diligent. That's working. If we humble ourselves to do the dirty job, Adonai notices. Press on. We can learn that we continue if we know we've got a good plan. Now, don't continue with a bad plan. That would be real silly. I know a lot of people that they work hard, but they don't work smart. They do a lot of foolish running around. They go from field to field, and they don't know how to focus and work smart. But Naomi, once she kind of snapped out of that poor, pitiful me thing, had a good plan. She knew exactly where to go, she knew who to go to, and she knew how to go to him. And she knew what the end result would be, because she started reading the signs. He did what? He did what? Now she's got her mind working creatively on the problem. So she comes up with a smart plan. And then Ruth says, no, you've just been a bitter complainer in the past. I'm not going to listen to you now. I got a better plan. No, that's not what she said. Good plan. And you know what? As badly as I fear rejection, I'm going to follow through on that plan of yours. And she did. You know, Orpah kissed her mother-in-law. Ruth clung to her. We have to cling to our mother in the Torah. We have to hang on. Can you imagine how afraid she must have been to go to that threshing floor full of men and wait till Boaz fell asleep and to creep up there and to uncover his feet and then for him to wake up at midnight and say, who are you? I don't know if I'd have lasted that long with that plan, but she hung in there. She wasn't afraid. She believed in the Torah. So she made a smart plan and she saw it through. We can also learn from her to work in one field. Become a laser instead of a light bulb. How powerful is a laser? It can go through metal. It can destroy things. But it's a very creative tool. Why? It's the same light. Light is the same. The difference between a light like that and a laser is this light is diffused. It goes everywhere. It's scattered. But a laser focuses and it just drives through and it gets that job done because it's focused. We need to be lasers instead of light bulbs. We don't need to scatter ourselves to all the fields when Boaz is saying, work in the safety of one field. Pick one and commit to it so that your work will be effective. You see, if Ruth had skipped from field to field, she could have never cultivated that relationship with Boaz. Where you work is where you harvest. That's something to remember. Where we work is where we will harvest. If we don't feel like we're getting a return, have we maybe sown our seed in too many different fields? Lastly, make sure no one in the field goes hungry if they're working diligently. You know, we do a lot at the Olive Branch to support people who have experienced hard times. But if you look at the lesson of Ruth, you're met when you were working. You're met when you were trying. When you are making an honest effort is when that need is fulfilled. So we need to remember the instructions in 1 Timothy 5. According to these instructions that Paul gave to Timothy, it says, you're not even going to put a widow under the age of 60 on the roll for assistance, unless she's disabled or something. That would have been an extenuating circumstance. But if she is under the age of 60 and she is able-bodied, no one's going to support her but her own children. It is her adult children's responsibility to take care of her, the same way that Ruth was taking care of Naomi, just like her own daughter should have. It's the responsibility of adult children to care for their parents. This is hard to hear. But this is what Paul told Timothy. Let a widow be put on the list only if she is not less than 60 years old, having brought up children, if she has shown hospitality to strangers, if she has washed the saints' feet, if she has assisted those in distress, and if she has devoted herself to every good work. You notice work was the major requirement. What Ruth did was work. Adonai rewards work. You do what you can do. And these conditions, every one of them that Paul gives to Timothy, they describe the covenant devotion of Boaz and Ruth. It's a life characterized by good, hard work and hospitality to others. If you can't see that fruit in someone's life, Paul says you have no business sustaining them, putting that burden on the congregation. That's the burden of their own children. Ruth and Boaz teach us some very practical ways to devote ourselves to the Torah marriage, to that covenant. If only we could set their standard as ours. If we could be that diligent in working for the covenant and the covenant people. None of these things were easy or convenient for them. They required a willing spirit, smart thinking, planning, patience, faith, bravery, hard work, humility, and commitment. We also need to take on obligation to the Torah covenant for the welfare of other covenant people, to our mothers in Torah of faith. And it's going to be inconvenient. Don't you know it would have been much more convenient for Ruth to remarry some young man, stay in Moab? Don't worry about Naomi. Her own will take care of her own. We have to take on the obligation for one another. Did you notice that even when Ruth was invited to sit down and eat lunch with the workers, she didn't eat all her lunch? She made her a little to-go box, and she carried it home and gave some of it to Naomi. That is taking on the obligation of your parents in faith. You see, the kinsman redeemer who had the first choice, he wouldn't help out. He thought that because the rule is that if you marry this woman, the children that you have with her will technically belong to her dead husband. And that child's name will be called through the dead husband, and it will be recorded on the town records. So when Boaz marries Ruth, he knows this full well, that this child will not be called from his family, from his name, that it will be called through Machlon. But he didn't care. We shouldn't do things just because we want public credit. We shouldn't do things just because we want a name for ourselves. It should not bother us to raise up someone else's name. It was inconvenient, but he did it anyway. But in the process, he brought a stranger into the covenant, and his name was not neglected, because when they started reading the genealogy at the very end of the book, whose name is listed? Boaz. What are you ever going to give up for the covenant? Nothing. Nothing at all. It would have been so much easier even for Boaz to select a Jewish wife who already knew everything, knew all the customs. The son would have been called through his own name. Yet, Boaz's name is reckoned in the lineage of David, and therefore the Messiah. He took that obligation of the kinsman redeemer because he was responding to her commitment to the covenant. That's what we should be responding to. Not how close someone is in the family, not what we will gain by being acquainted with this person or having a relationship with this person, but we should be responding to the level of their covenant commitment and their level of commitment to covenant people. We're going to have to work in some barley fields of inconvenience because it teaches us about the kingdom of heaven and hope. A person like Naomi that doesn't work, they just let life happen to them. But a person like Ruth that'll get out and work in the field of inconvenience, they happen to life. You see how many things started happening when she started working? People of faith in Scripture gained the Father's attention while they were making, creating, doing, working, serving a master, serving a king, shepherding, offering incense in the temple, fishing, mending nets, rowing a boat, cleaning, threshing, praying, governing, plowing, studying the Word, fasting. It's doing, it's creating, it's making. That's where He meets us, while we're doing. This covenant is a marriage covenant. And there is no shortage of marriages of convenience. We can look around and we can point here and here and here and here in our community, and we know that that is a marriage of convenience. In fact, they're so convenient, they're too lazy to get divorced. We know marriages like that. The love is gone. There might have been some passion at the beginning. It never developed, into that mature marriage relationship. But a covenant marriage is more than just a commitment. It's a commitment of love. It's a commitment of devotion. But it is anything but convenient. I'm speaking more of spiritual marriage than I am of literal marriages. It's just a good comparison. Our marriage to our husband, our heavenly husband, is probably not going to be convenient in this lifetime. Can we evaluate our commitment to that marriage based on the book of Ruth? Can we evaluate our commitment to one another based on the lessons of Ruth? As an assembly, can we evaluate our diligence in working for one another? Has our own love grown cold toward the Father, toward one another? Are we here merely as a convenience or when it's convenient? Are we there with Him in that relationship with Him as a convenience or when it is convenient? We each have to evaluate these things. There's nothing in Scripture that will ever say this covenant is convenient for us. It will say it's serious, it's everlasting, it's from generation to generation, that it's loving, it's patient, it's kind, it's humble, it's grateful, it's all these things. It's tender, it's an affair of the heart, but it will never say it's convenient. You see, Adonai put Adam in the garden to work. This is work. It's part of the covenant to work. It's part of our godly nature. God works. The Torah covenant is going to require some labor. If we are going to bring first fruits, we're going to have to work, right? You don't get first fruits without working. You want to bring in an offering, you're going to have to work. There's no other way to bring an offering. You don't give God something someone's given you. You give God the things that you earned by the sweat of your brow, by toiling in that garden, by working. I would go so far to say that any adult who is not working can never be truly happy and fulfilled, because that is part of our godly nature. Unless we are laboring at an occupation, as a volunteer, as a full-time parent, at school work, at some sort of occupation or work, we're never going to be happy. We're going to be a Naomi. We're going to be bitter. And you know what Boaz and Ruth named their child? Obed. What's Obed mean? Worker. This guy's a laborer. You get two working people, they're going to have a working child. He is a server. Can we say that this is the sort of fruit that we're bringing forth as well? That we are bringing forth children that are willing to labor and work for the covenant? We've got to evaluate each year at this time our commitment, our sanctification, our devotion, our love for our betrothed. Because he said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. You'll be devoted to me. Have we become conformed to a convenient world rather than transformed into the mind of Yeshua, our Messiah? How can we look at him and find out whether we have been transformed into that heavenly mind, or whether we have been conformed to a world that does not respect our covenant? Well, let's look at how Yeshua kept a Sabbath. What was his custom? He assembled. He read the scriptures. He discussed the scriptures. He worshiped. He prayed. He fellowshiped with the stranger and the alien, as well as his own disciples. He discussed the covenant principles with anyone who was willing to hear him. He drew people in. He ate common meals. And most importantly, he healed people. He built them up. He tried to restore them in their faith. Are these things our practices? Have we been transformed to that mind, or have we been conformed to a different spirit? Do we let the world's challenges to our Sabbaths, to our festivals, pass without some sort of creative working response? You can't fix the world. You can only fix yours. Do we let things pass without even a peep? In last week's Torah portion, and I guess this is the most important part of what I have to say about Shavuot, we read a powerful verse. And it's kind of reiterated in Numbers 2:17. And it's not translated very well in English, but in Hebrew it reads, Ka'asher yachanu ken yisa'u. And what that means is, as they encamp, so shall they journey. As we display our sign, the Shabbat, we encamp each week and we rest from a journey. And we think we're resting from the journey that is behind us, but we're wrong. As we encamp, so shall we journey. It is how we make our camp. It is how we rest on Shabbat that determines the nature of the week to come. And that's why we're going to talk about Sukkot tomorrow. As we encamp tonight, so shall our journey to Sukkot be. As we encamp on a weekly Shabbat, so shall your coming week be. We don't keep the Sabbath. Don't be fooled. It is the Sabbath that keeps us. It is the Sabbath that surrounds and protects us. It preserves us. It gives us life for the coming week. Resting on the seventh day is not sliding into home base. No way. It's what you do on Shabbat. It's how you plan for it. It's how you make it. La'asot. What you do with it, how you make it. It's how you relate to your families, to your congregation that determines the type of journey you will experience in the week to come. You are not investing your week in the Sabbath. You are investing your Sabbath in the coming week. As we encamp at these three pilgrimage festivals, at Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, we are determining our journey to that next destination. At Pesach, we determine what it will be to Shavuot. At Shavuot, we determine what it will be to Sukkot. But it's bigger than that, because it's referring to a millennium, to an eternity. There is a festival of Sukkot that is called the millennial reign. It's a 1,000-year reign of rest for some, not for everyone, for some. The Sabbaths and the festivals that we observe right now will affect your future beyond what you can even imagine at this point. What you do now, how you are encamping now at your festivals, at your feast days, is going to determine how that journey is. And tomorrow we're going to study how Gideon moved from festival to festival, and how he had to fight for each one, and how he had to go fight at Sukkot. And you think, well, there's no fighting at Sukkot. Yes, there is. As you encamp, so shall your journey be. We have to work very hard on the daily journey, no doubt about it. We have to make a living. But we also have to work equally as hard to create our spiritual life on Shabbat. To do those things that are not only permitted to us on Shabbat, but commanded to us on our feast days, on our Shabbat, on our weekly Shabbat. The days of our encampment, we are to rest. We are to be refreshed. We are to have joy. We are to have light, food, drink, happiness, commitment, self-sacrifice, remembrance, study of the Torah, teaching, singing, dancing, healing, prayer. How well do we plan for that? Let me be the first one to say, I fall down. I don't plan the way I should for the weekly Sabbaths, and I certainly don't plan the way that I should be planning for the festivals. I'm doing way too much sliding into home base. Search the soul, and soul, we're in trouble. Because we are neglecting the encampment. And that is why the journey is becoming harder and harder. Our rest from work on the Sabbath is not rest from our work of creation of the Sabbath. You create the Sabbath. Do you understand that? It does not say that God did no work on the Sabbath. It said He finished His work on the Sabbath. There is still work to be done on the Sabbath. It's a different nature than the rest of the week. We're going to have to work very hard, just like Ruth worked at her daily work. We're going to have to work equally as hard on our weekly Sabbaths and on our festivals, with an eye toward the future, to plan, to create on this encampment day. The same principles that Boaz and Ruth applied in their work to the Torah covenant, we can apply those same principles to creating a Sabbath rest and festival rest. We are going to have to prioritize our loyalty on our weekly Sabbaths and on our festival days. We are going to have to love and be kind to people who come in here and seem strange to us. Sometimes we're going to have to choose something less attractive because it's the sensible thing to do. Sometimes we're going to have to conform to someone else's time schedule. We're going to have to overlook blunders of ignorance or learning. Instead of reprimanding, maybe we can explain a better way. Maybe we can teach a better way in kindness. And might we as well be reminded that these are rehearsals. We're practicing. No one's going to be perfect. We are becoming perfected. We will be better at creating our Sabbath next week than we are this week. And the week after, we will be better. And next year, our Pesach will be better. And next year, our Shavuot will be better. And our Sukkot will be better because we are rehearsing, and every time we practice, we will get better. We are going to have to protect the most vulnerable among us from snakes, from wild beasts, and from vipers, and maybe even from other fields that fall under the Israelite name. Not every field is a safe field. We are going to have to exercise patience and follow the rules, even if it means we're risking losing something we really want. We're going to have to redefine who our family is. We are going to sometimes have to work diligently a job that we think is demeaning to us. We are going to have to plan better, plan smart, and then follow through with it. And we are going to have to feed and provide food for the hungry when they can demonstrate that they are working as well as they can on their own behalf. So let's reflect. It's Shavuot. The sun's down now, I'm pretty sure. Yep, sun's down. Shavuot is past. We've entered into our weekly Shabbat. How well have we committed this past year? How devoted have we been? How much love have we demonstrated in this covenant relationship? Not just to Elohim, but to one another. Are we as committed to one another and to Elohim as Ruth and Boaz were? To one another and to the covenant God? Are we becoming lazy Naomis and we just sit around and complain all the time? I complain a little, I'll admit it. I don't want to be that way. I don't want people to come to the Torah in spite of me instead of because of me. I don't want to be a person that's got to be jump-started back into the covenant. I don't want somebody constantly having to bring me back on board into a Torah state of mind and attitude. Are we improving our Sabbaths and our festivals each week and each year? Are we making them? Are we creating them? Can we really sing that song of Ruth? Can we say to one another, to our brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers and grandmothers and grandfathers in faith, can we say this to one another? To each person in this room, wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, that's where I'm going to live. Wherever you die, I die with you. Your people are my people. And your God is my God. Are we prepared to say, let nothing but death separate us? No matter where we go on this earth, I say right now, let nothing but death ever separate each of you from me. These are the words, the work, the devotion of Shavuot, the fullness of the barley harvest. I pray that as we step now towards Sukkot, that we will rededicate ourselves to the covenant God, to one another, to this journey ahead. Whether we're a Boaz, we're a Ruth, or we're a Naomi, and I think we're all of them at one time or another. No matter who we are, tomorrow's a new day. This is tomorrow. Sun went down, right?
Amen.
This is tomorrow. It's a new day. It's fresh. Mercy's new. Let's think about how we encamp this Shabbat. And how we encamp with one another today until sundown tomorrow is going to determine how each of us journey through the coming week. And I pray that we will work diligently at our day of rest so that that journey for each of us will be in total shalom. And this is the blessing of Boaz. May Yahweh be with you. May Yahweh recompense your work, your hard work. And may a full reward be given to each one of you. The Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to trust.